Hey everyone, and welcome back to Contact Pod. Today we're going deep on something that, well, I think it's safe to say is on everyone's minds these days.
hmm
Data breaches.
Yeah,
It seems like every time you turn around, there's another one in the news, you know,
it's really nonstop,
and it can be tough to keep up with what's going on and what it all means for us.
for sure.
So to kick things off, let's talk about a recent case that I think really highlights the scope of this whole issue.
Okay.
Power School.
Right.
You might have heard about it. They're a huge education software company.
Huge.
They serve tons of schools across North America, like something like 16,000 customers,
Wow.
over 50 million students.
Yeah, PowerSchool is a major player in the education tech space, so this breach has really sent shockwaves through the whole industry, really.
And the really unsettling part is the kind of information that was compromised.
Yeah.
We're talking addresses, social security numbers, grades, even medical information in some cases.
It's scary.
And it wasn't just student data either. Parent information was exposed as well. So this isn't just about, some minor inconvenience or having to change a password.
Mhm.
This is sensitive personal information
Uh-huh.
that could have serious consequences if it falls into the wrong hands.
Absolutely.
This could impact people for years to come.
Yeah, this is a prime example of why data breaches are so concerning. The potential for harm is it's significant, and it goes way beyond like just financial losses, which is what most people think of right away.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the financial aspect because it seems like every time I read about a data breach,
Yeah.
there's a mention of extortion,
Mm-hmm.
hackers demanding a ransom.
Mm-hmm.
What is the motivation behind these attacks?
Well, I think while some breaches might be motivated by things like activism or espionage, the vast majority are financially driven. Cybercriminals are essentially running a business, right?
Right.
And their goal is to profit from the stolen data.
So it's like the digital equivalent of traditional crimes like theft and extortion, just on a massive scale.
Precisely. I mean, think about it. Hackers can sell this data on the dark web,
Boy.
use it to commit identity theft,
Right.
or hold it hostage for ransom.
Mm-hmm.
The potential for profit is enormous, which is why cybercrime is such a booming industry, really.
Yeah. Speaking of the dark web, it sounds like something out of a spy movie.
Right.
What exactly is it,
Yeah.
and how does it play into all of this?
The dark web is essentially a hidden part of the internet that isn't indexed by, your traditional search engines.
Right.
It's often associated with illegal activities, including the buying and selling of this stolen data.
So like a digital black market.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it as like an underground marketplace where these cyber criminals can connect with buyers and trade these illicit goods anonymously. And data is a very valuable commodity in this market.
Okay, that makes sense. So the hackers get into these systems, steal the data, and then they head to the dark web to cash in. But how do they even get into these systems in the first place? I'm picturing, some Hollywood-style hacking scene with lines of code flying across the screen.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That's a common misconception. I mean, while those sophisticated techniques definitely exist, the most common way hackers gain access is actually a lot simpler. Stolen credentials.
Stolen credentials, you mean like usernames and passwords?
Exactly.
Affiliate?
It's often easier to exploit human error
Oh,
than it is to break through these really complex security systems.
that makes sense.
Think about it. People reuse passwords.
Yeah, guilty.
They fall for phishing scams. They leave their devices unlocked.
All the time.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's very common.
So it's not always about brute force hacking. It's often about taking advantage of our own carelessness.
Precisely. And in the case of PowerSchool, the hackers reportedly gained access through the customer support portal using, stolen login credentials. So it really highlights the importance of strong password hygiene and being aware of those phishing attempts.
Right. So going back to Power School for a moment, we know they were extorted,
Mm-hmm.
but they haven't disclosed how much they paid. Why do you think that is?
I think there are a few reasons why companies might choose to keep ransom payments under wraps. One is fear of reputational damage.
Makes sense.
They might worry that disclosing a payment will make them appear vulnerable
Yeah.
and erode customer trust. Another reason could be legal concerns.
Okay.
There might be regulations or laws that discourage or even prohibit paying ransoms to cybercriminals.
Interesting. And wouldn't disclosing the amount paid encourage more attacks? Like hackers would know that they have a potential payday if they target that company.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a major concern. By keeping the amount secret, companies hope to deter future attacks
No.
and avoid setting a precedent.
So it's a tough situation.
Yeah.
On the one hand, transparency is important, but on the other hand, there are valid reasons for keeping certain details confidential.
It's a really complex issue with no easy answers.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the broader challenge of navigating this evolving digital landscape where data breaches are becoming increasingly common.
It's definitely a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that this PowerSchool case
Uh-huh.
is just one example of a much larger problem. Data breaches are happening all the time
Oh, for sure.
across all industries.
That's right. And with the increasing amount of data being generated and collected, I mean, the risk of breaches is only going to grow.
Right.
Which brings us to a really crucial question. How do we adapt to this new reality?
It feels kind of overwhelming.
I know.
Like, how can we possibly stay ahead of these cyber criminals when they seem to be getting more sophisticated all the time?
I know what you mean. It's understandable to feel overwhelmed,
Yeah.
but it's important to remember that we're not powerless in this situation. There are steps we can take to protect ourselves and mitigate the risks.
So it's not about living in fear. It's about being proactive
Mm-hmm.
and informed.
Exactly. It's about understanding the threats, taking practical steps to secure our data, and adapting our behavior in this digital world.
All right, well, I'm ready to dive deeper into those practical steps and learn more about how we can navigate this new digital landscape safely and effectively.
Okay, great.
Welcome back to Contact Pod. Before the break, we were talking about the growing threat of data breaches and how incidents like the one at PowerSchool really highlight just how big this problem is.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the motivation behind these attacks, the role of the dark web, and the fact that stolen credentials are often the weakest link in the security chain.
Right.
It's scary to think about.
It is.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about what we can do to protect ourselves.
Okay, yeah.
I know you mentioned that there are practical steps we can take to mitigate the risks. Where do we even begin?
Well, the first step is just understanding that data security is an ongoing process.
Okay.
It's not a one-time fix, right?
Right.
It's about building good habits and being vigilant in our digital lives.
So it's kind of like maintaining good physical health.
Yeah.
It's not just about going to the doctor once a year. It's about making healthy choices every day.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And just like with physical health, prevention is key. One of the most effective things you can do is strengthen your passwords.
I know.
I know, everyone says it.
I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
But it's worth repeating.
It is.
Strong passwords are the first line of defense against these cyber attacks.
Absolutely. And strong doesn't just mean long. It means using a combination of upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols.
Mm-hmm.
And ideally, each online account should have a unique password.
Okay. Yeah, that can be really hard to remember. I have so many online accounts, it's practically impossible to keep track of all those passwords.
Yeah, I hear you. That's where a password manager comes in.
All right.
It's a tool that securely stores all your passwords in an encrypted vault, so you only have to remember one master password.
Oh, that's a great tip.
Yeah.
I've heard of password managers,
Uh-huh.
but I haven't actually tried one yet. Do you have any recommendations?
Oh, yeah, there are several really reputable password managers out there.
Okay.
Some popular options include LastPass, 1Password, and Dashlane.
Mm.
They all offer slightly different features and pricing plans, so it's worth doing a little research to find one that fits your needs.
All right. So password managers are definitely on my to-do list.
Good.
What else can we do to boost our digital defenses?
Another crucial step is to be aware of phishing scams.
Oh, yeah.
These are attempts by cybercriminals to trick you into giving away personal information,
Right. Yeah.
like your passwords or credit card details.
Oh, phishing scams. I get those annoying emails all the time.
I know, everyone does.
They're getting so sophisticated these days, it's hard to tell what's real and what's fake.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
They're designed to look like legitimate emails from banks, online retailers, social media platforms, you name it.
Uh-huh.
But if you look closely, there are usually some red flags.
Like what? What should we be looking for?
Well, first, you want to check the sender's email address.
Okay.
Does it actually match the official address of the organization it claims to be from?
Right.
Often there'll be like subtle misspellings or variations in the domain name.
So if I get an email from like amaz0n.com instead of amazon.com,
Exactly.
that's a red flag.
Yeah, exactly. Also, Pay attention to the language and tone of the email.
Mm-hmm.
Is it overly urgent or demanding?
Yeah.
Are there grammatical errors or awkward phrasing?
Okay.
Legitimate organizations typically have high standards for their communications.
Right.
So that's something to watch out for.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And what about those emails that ask you to click on a link to, like, update your account information or verify your identity?
Yeah, those are classic phishing tactics. Never click on a link in an email if you're not absolutely sure it's legitimate.
Okay.
Instead, go directly to the organization's website or contact them through their official channels to verify the requests.
So it's always better to err on the side of caution.
Yes, definitely.
If something feels off, it probably is.
Exactly. Trust your instincts. And remember, legitimate organizations will never ask for your sensitive information via email or text message.
All right, so we've covered strong passwords
Mm-hmm.
and phishing scams.
Hmm.
What other, I guess, what did you call it?
Cyber hygiene?
Cyber hygiene practices should we be adopting?
Well, keeping your software and apps up to date is crucial.
Okay.
Those updates often include security patches
Right.
that fix vulnerabilities that hackers could exploit.
So it's kind of like getting your digital vaccines.
That's a great analogy. Just like vaccines protect us from those physical viruses, software updates protect our devices from digital threats.
Right.
And speaking of protection, make sure your computer has up-to-date antivirus and anti-malware software installed.
So it acts like a shield against those nasty digital bugs trying to infect our systems.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And while we're on the topic of protection, let's talk about backing up your data.
Oh, yes. Data backups are so important.
They are.
I've learned that the hard way. A few years ago, my computer crashed, and I lost a bunch of important files.
Oh, no.
It was a nightmare.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So yeah, I learned that lesson.
Yeah, that's why having a recent backup can really be a lifesaver.
Right.
It protects you not only from hardware failures, but also from ransomware attacks.
Ransomware, that's where hackers lock up your files and demand a ransom to release them, right?
Unfortunately, yes. And it's becoming increasingly common.
Oh, wow.
But if you have a backup, you won't be forced to pay up.
Okay.
You can simply restore your files from the backup.
Okay, so we've got strong passwords, phishing awareness, software updates, antivirus protection, and data backups. That's a lot to remember.
It might seem overwhelming at first, but once you establish these habits,
Right.
they become second nature.
Okay.
And the peace of mind is definitely worth the effort.
Yeah, you're right. It's like anything else. So the more you practice, the easier it becomes.
Exactly.
But even with all these precautions,
Mm-hmm.
there's still a chance that our data could be compromised, right?
That's true. Yeah, no security system is foolproof.
Right.
But by taking these steps, we can significantly reduce those risks and minimize the potential damage.
So it's about being proactive and informed, not living in a constant state of fear.
Exactly. And it's also about recognizing that data security is a shared responsibility.
Okay.
It's not just up to individuals to protect their data. Companies and organizations also have a crucial role to play.
That's a great point. What kind of responsibility do companies have in all of this?
Well, they need to prioritize data security
Mm-hmm.
and invest in robust systems to protect the information that they're collecting, right?
Yeah.
They also need to be transparent about their data practices and inform customers about what data they collect, how they use it, and how they're protecting it.
And what about those data breach notification laws we talked about earlier? How effective are those in holding companies accountable?
Well, data breach notification laws vary from state to state.
Okay.
But in general, they require companies to notify individuals if their personal information has been compromised in a breach.
So it's a way of ensuring that people are aware of the situation
Yeah.
and can take steps to protect themselves.
Exactly. But the effectiveness of these laws is debatable, honestly.
Really?
Some people argue that they don't go far enough in holding companies accountable for data breaches
I see.
or in really incentivizing them to improve their security practices.
It's a complex issue with no easy solutions. But I think it's important to have these conversations and continue to push for stronger data privacy regulations.
I agree. And in the meantime, individuals really need to be proactive and take those steps to protect themselves.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, we have.
We've talked about the motivations behind data breaches,
Mhm.
the methods hackers use,
Right.
and the practical steps we can take to mitigate the risks. But I think there's another important aspect to consider: the psychological impact of data breaches.
That's a great point. Yeah.
It's not just about the practical implications like potential financial losses or identity theft.
Right.
It's also about the emotional toll it can take on people.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about that feeling of violation,
Mm-hmm.
the loss of control,
Right.
the anxiety that comes with knowing that your personal information is out there.
Exactly. And those feelings are completely valid.
They are.
It's important to acknowledge them and seek support if you're struggling to cope with them. So, what advice would you give to someone who's feeling overwhelmed or anxious about data breaches?
I think first and foremost, remember that you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
Millions of people are experiencing these same feelings.
It's like we're all in this leaky digital boat together.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And knowing that others are going through the same thing, it can be really validating.
Mm-hmm.
So, don't be afraid to talk to people, to
Mhm.
share your concerns, to seek support.
Yeah. So, what else can we do to manage these feelings of anxiety?
I think focusing on what you can control is key. Taking those proactive steps we talked about earlier, like strengthening your passwords,
Yeah.
being mindful of phishing scams, using a VPN, all
Mhm.
those things can really help empower you and reduce those feelings of helplessness.
So, it's like taking back some of that control that feels like it's been lost.
Exactly. And remember, it's okay to unplug from the digital world from time to time.
Oh, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Taking a digital detox can be so refreshing.
Absolutely. Spend time in nature, connect with loved ones in person, engage in activities that bring you joy and peace.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about finding balance.
Balance, that's the key word.
Yeah.
Balancing our digital lives with our real lives.
Yeah.
Balancing convenience with security.
Mm-hmm.
Balancing our fears with our hopes.
Well said. It's an ongoing process, a constant dance
Right.
between navigating the digital world
Yeah.
and safeguarding our well-being.
And it's a dance we're all learning together.
Exactly. We're all in this together.
So we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the practicalities of data breaches to the emotional impact they can have.
Right.
And I think it's important to remember that while the digital landscape can feel overwhelming at times,
It can.
there are things we can do to protect ourselves,
Right.
our data, and our peace of mind.
Absolutely. It's about staying informed, being proactive, and adapting to this ever-evolving digital world.
And perhaps most importantly, it's about remembering that we're not alone in this journey.
That's right.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
We've spent a lot of time talking about how serious data breaches are
Yeah.
and how to be more careful online, all these steps we can take.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like there's kind of a paradox here.
How so?
Well, on the one hand, we're being told to be extremely cautious with our data, right?
Right.
Strong passwords, phishing awareness, all of that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it seems like our data is already out there, right?
It does, doesn't it?
I mean, we hear about these massive breaches all the time, and it makes you wonder, if it's already so compromised,
Yeah.
what's the point of even trying to protect it at all?
That's a really valid question, and I think it gets to the heart of, the challenge we're all facing in this new digital landscape.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to remember that it's not about achieving perfect security.
Right.
That's pretty much impossible in today's world.
Yeah.
It's more about managing risk.
Okay, so it's like accepting that there's a certain level of risk that just comes with participating in the digital world, right? And taking steps to minimize that risk as much as possible.
Exactly. It's kind of similar to how we approach, physical safety in the real world, right? We lock our doors.
Right.
We try to be aware of our surroundings,
Yeah.
but we don't live in a constant state of fear or avoid going outside altogether.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how do we apply that same logic to our digital lives?
Oh.
If we can't completely prevent our data from being compromised, what can we do?
I think it starts with understanding the value of our data and taking steps to protect what's most important.
Okay.
Because not all data is created equal, right?
Right.
Some information is way more sensitive than others.
So prioritizing, you mean?
Yeah.
Like maybe my social media password isn't as crucial as my online banking credentials.
Precisely. It's about being more discerning about where we're sharing information
Okay.
and what level of access we're giving to these different apps and services.
Right.
Do we really need to give that fitness tracker access to our entire contact list?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about being more intentional with our, what is it?
Digital footprint.
Digital footprint, right?
Yeah.
Thinking critically about what we're sharing, why we're sharing it, and who we're sharing it with.
Exactly. And it also means being prepared for the possibility of a breach.
Okay.
Knowing what to do if your data is compromised can
Right.
make a huge difference.
So like having a plan of action,
Yeah.
knowing who to contact, what information to gather,
Right.
how to freeze your credit, things like that.
Exactly. It's like having a fire escape plan for your digital life, right?
Right. Yeah.
You hope you never have to use it,
Yeah.
but it's there if you need it.
That's a great way to put it. So it's not about living in fear, but being prepared and informed,
Right.
knowing the risks, taking reasonable precautions, and having that plan in place just in case.
Absolutely. And, I think there's another really important piece of this whole data breach puzzle that sometimes gets overlooked.
Okay.
The role of companies and organizations. They have a responsibility to protect the data they're collecting, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we can do everything right as individuals, but if the companies we trust with our data aren't doing their part, well, we're still vulnerable.
That's right. Companies need to prioritize data security, invest in those robust systems, and adopt strong security practices from the get-go.
Right.
And they need to be transparent about their data practices, right?
Yeah.
Inform customers about how they're protecting their information.
And what about holding companies accountable when breaches do happen?
Yeah.
Are those data breach notification laws effective in making sure companies are taking this stuff seriously?
Data breach notification laws are a good start,
Okay.
but they vary a lot
Right.
in their scope and their effectiveness.
Yeah.
Some argue they just don't go far enough in holding companies accountable
Oh,
or
no.
incentivizing them to improve their security practices.
So there's still a lot of work to do in terms of creating a regulatory environment that truly protects consumers' data privacy.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think this whole conversation we're having about data breaches,
Yeah.
it's actually driving a much bigger shift in how we think about data privacy and security overall.
Right.
We're seeing a growing demand for stronger regulations, more ethical data practices, and more transparency from companies.
So it's like a wake-up call for both individuals and organizations.
I think so, yeah.
We all need to step up our game.
Exactly. It's forcing us to rethink our relationship with data, to recognize its value,
Right.
and demand better protection for ourselves in this digital world.
I'm hopeful that these conversations will lead to a more mindful and responsible digital ecosystem,
I hope so, too.
one where data privacy and security are truly a top priority.
Yeah, me too. It's an ongoing process, for sure.
Uh-huh.
But I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really hopeful note to end on.
I think so.
Data breaches are a reality we have to face, but by being informed, proactive, and demanding better protections from, the folks who are holding our data, we can navigate this whole digital landscape with more confidence and peace of mind.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities we're all facing in this age of data.
I hope so.
Remember, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay curious. And as always, thanks for tuning in to Context Pod. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the tech world.